Chapter 17, The Recovery Part 2, Antony's POV. As Antony watched Hanyu admiring himself in the hand mirror, he was more relaxed than he'd been in a long time. That was a strange way to feel after everything that had happened to him last night, he supposed, but it was true. Marcus had the sadism out of his system now, so everything would be much more pleasant going forward. He'd be sweet and conciliatory in public, and when they had a chance to go to bed together, he would be almost doting. He'd probably go easier on poor Esau, too. Yes, everything was going to be much nicer now. Things were already nice. Antony's fingers working Hanyu's tumble of golden hair had felt wonderful. He really would like to do that again soon. It was good to feel those gentle touches in a safe way, a way he could control. He'd thought about asking the boy for a massage, but he hadn't felt quite ready to lie down and feel another's hands on him. It was much better to be doing the touching, not receiving it. He liked watching Hanyu preen in the mirror. He still couldn't believe that the boy didn't pride himself on his hair. It was so lovely. How could the other children have mocked it? The thought annoyed Antony inordinately, but he liked that when he told Hanyu he was beautiful, his offering seemed to believe him and be pleased. He liked pleasing Hanyu. He knew this loose, happy feeling that flooded his body as he pampered the boy was dangerous, but today he felt so vulnerable and soft that he didn't really care. Being with Hanyu, touching Hanyu, talking with Hanyu, making Hanyu smile, it felt like wrapping both of them in a giant warm blanket and hiding from everything else in the world. It felt amazing. "I love it," the boy enthused. "Thank you, my lord." Hanyu was clearly having trouble spitting his name out. Antony rather wished he hadn't offered him the option. He hadn't intended to complicate the boy's life, only to stop him from fussing about his slip-up the night before. Anyhow, it was the truth. Antony didn't care if the boy used his name. He was so used to hearing Antony and my lord, both, that he'd come to see them as interchangeable. It hadn't even registered in his pain-fogged mind that Hanyu had used his name until he'd seen the horror on the boy's ashen face. "Fine hair deserves attention," Antony told Hanyu now, doing his best to keep his voice light and even. His offhandedness crumbled a little as the boy's face split into an even wider grin. Damn it, why did his joy have to be so obvious and so gratifying? It pleased and soothed Antony in every corner of his mind, and he found himself speaking aloud. "It was pleasant to do. We should do it again soon." What he wanted to say was, "We should do this every day. Every time I wake up, I want to be able to look forward to chatting with you while I arrange your hair." The boy beamed at him as if he'd heard the silent part as well. "I'm yours, my lord, hair included. You can do with me as you like." Antony's inside squirmed uncomfortably at the words. They were true. Of course they were. He'd used them often enough himself as an excuse for why he could be softer on the boy than the others would have likely advised. But still, they reminded him a little too much of what he'd said to Marcus yesterday and what had followed. He didn't ever want to make someone feel the way he'd felt at that moment, especially not his cheerful, gentle, fragile Hanyu. When the boy told him he could do whatever he wanted with him, he didn't have the faintest idea of what that encompassed. He didn't know what Antony could do to a human, what he had done to humans, and the unthinkingly trustful, worshipful way he said the words and gazed down at the vampire made Antony feel a little sick and unworthy? Strange as it was to admit, even to himself, yes, that was it, unworthy. Antony lowered the mirror and turned away from Hanyu to put it on the table. "Being at another's disposal can be hard. I do not want to make things hard for you." "You don't," Hanyu rushed to assure him. "I'm very happy, my lord." "No platitudes," Antony snapped, still not turning around. "You don't have to lie. I know you're not happy. You're crying your eyes out half the time." "I've always cried a lot," Hanyu said. "It doesn't mean I'm not content, though I suppose I was unhappy when you made me put my palette in the sitting room. I never did find out, my lord. What did I do wrong that first night?" Antony remembered how casually he'd decided to banish the boy. He'd never thought it would make him so miserable. He hadn't thought. He never considered how Hanyu would interpret the order to move his cot. Hell, he'd barely been aware that the boy was thinking and feeling anything. When was the last time he'd considered any offering's feelings at all? When had he grown so callous? Didn't he used to be the bleeding heart out of his siblings? He finally turned to face the boy, who was peering at him a little nervously as he awaited his answer. "You didn't do anything wrong, Hanyu," he said. "Truly. I just didn't like how happy you were. I found it confusing and a little tiring." "Oh!" The boy looked stricken. "I might have known. I've been told 1,000 times that I'm too enthusiastic. I'm so sorry, my lord. I can—" "No," Antony interrupted. I was I changed my mind. It pleases me to see you cheerful, even if I still don't understand why you are. Why wouldn't I be? Hanyu blinked in confusion at him. You're so kind to me. Antony felt that pang of unworthiness again. He pushed past it. I didn't mean to make you unhappy by sending you out of the room, he said. I'm glad you're back in it now, though. The look Antony gave him was so rapturous that even Antony's currently dulled senses of danger sprang to life, and he averted his gaze. This way I can kick you when you snore, he said. Now come on, I want to start painting you. Hanyu followed him obediently to the sitting room and submitted to Antony's efforts at posing him, albeit with pupils blown wide and parted lips. Such frank sexual desire was hardly unusual among Antony's crew. After 1,000 years, few of them bothered with coyness anymore, but he still wished the boy wouldn't want him quite so blatantly. Oh well, there were a few hours of daylight left before he had to go face everyone, and he intended to enjoy them. He sat down at his easel and set to work. Hanyu's POV. Hanyu liked the new pose much better. Instead of draping elegantly over the couch, Lord Antony had him leaning forward, his elbows planted on his knees and his chin cupped in his hands. It's the way you were sitting when you listened to me play, the god explained as he settled onto his stool. Oh! Hanyu smiled at the memory. You play so well, my lord. It made me a little sad, but I love to listen. I thought I was the one doing the flattering today. Nonetheless, Lord Antony looked pleased by the compliment. Anyhow, it would be very embarrassing if I hadn't developed a little skill, given all the time I've spent practicing. What was the first instrument you learned? Hanyu asked. The god seemed to have mastered plenty of them, and he'd certainly had time to learn as many as he liked, but Hanyu wondered which instrument had first captured his attention and made him want to play. The first I tried to learn was the flute, Lord Antony said, after a long moment's consideration. Someone... The god's voice trailed off, and for an instant he looked absolutely horror-struck. Then he gave his head a little shake and glared down at the easel. The first I actually mastered was a small handheld drum. I don't have one to show you. His face and voice had turned as inviting as a summer day in the desert. Hanyu decided to change the subject. Will you stay in tonight, my lord? He asked. I don't mind staying up late if you want to keep working on the painting. No, the god replied immediately. I need to deliver some coordinates to Theodora, and anyhow, it wouldn't do to hide away in here all night. Best to be seen out and about. Of course, my lord. Hanyu couldn't help being a little disappointed. He'd hoped that the strange intimacy of the day might continue for a while longer, but he supposed it made sense that the lord of the gods would be too busy to spend all his time petting and painting a human slave. I'm going to take you to the upper deck with me tonight, Lord Antony said, furrowing his brow as he dabbed at his canvas. Theodora would like to talk with you sometime, and this is as good a time as any to indulge her. He looked at Hanyu and smiled. I think she's going to like you very much. Hanyu goggled at the god. Lord Theodora wants to speak to me? Truly? His master rolled his eyes, but his smile stayed in place. Do you think I have nothing better to do with my time than make up lies to tell you, pet? He was pet again, but Hanyu barely registered this in his sudden excitement. But they say she can speak to every drop of water and grain of sand in the whole sea, that she can steer through a storm as easily as a tailor threads a needle, that she taught her ancestors how to fashion their fishing boats so they won't be overturned. We sing Theodora's lay whenever the fleet goes out to fish in the deeper waters, and when they return, we... Hanyu. Yes, my lord? Breathe, then be quiet. Sorry, my lord. He dragged in a breath, but it didn't calm the wild hammering of his heart. What would a towering, legendary figure like Lord Theodora want with him? She wants to see you, because when I was telling her about you, she thought you sounded amusing, Lord Antony said, returning his gaze to his canvas. Hanyu gawked at him in blind astonishment for a long moment, which Lord Antony didn't seem to notice with his eyes still fixed on the canvas, but finally Hanyu managed to choke out some strangled words. You spoke to the other gods about me, my lord? Hanyu couldn't stop the happy tears that sprang to his eyes or the smile that split his face. I told them you were irritating, the god grumbled, but there was no real bite to his words, and loud, and incapable of holding still for even the... Heavens, boy, stop blubbering! I'm sorry I said you were irritating. I told you I wasn't going to get rid of you. That's not why I'm crying, my lord. Hanyu swiped at the hot tears and snot streaking his face, ignoring Lord Antony's squawk of protest at his movement. I'm just so happy. Thank you for talking about me, thinking about me, letting me matter to you. It was dizzying to think that Hanyu was taking up space in a mind that had guarded and guided his people for 1,000 years, but he felt as if he might melt with joy. He had been trained since earliest childhood to be the perfect servant, invisible and unobtrusive, but through some beautiful, undeserved miracle, he had the attention of the god around whom his world revolved. "Ruin your makeup," Lord Antony groused. His complaints grew louder when Hanyu rolled from the sofa, then subsided as he crawled to the god's feet and embraced his leg. Perhaps Hanyu should have felt foolish, clutching and crying happily into a trouser leg, but he craved the god's touch so badly that in the moment it was hard to care. He dropped to the floor to press tearful, grateful kisses to Lord Antony's feet, then rested his cheek against them and continued hugging his ankles. No doubt his makeup was indeed ruined. He was flopped gracelessly on the floor. His face was a mess of tears and snot, and Hanyu had never felt more special and beautiful and cared for. "For goodness sakes, pet." The god's voice was heartbreakingly gentle, as was his hand in Hanyu's hair. He almost sounded hesitant, though that was of course impossible. He stroked Hanyu's hair in long, light movements that made Hanyu's whole body ache with want. "There's no need to carry on like that. It's just an introduction." "It's not." Hanyu pressed into Lord Antony's hand. Forgive me for contradicting you, my lord, but it isn't just that. I'm so grateful that you would think of me outside these rooms, my lord." "Shit, Hanyu, of course I think about you," his master said, sounding strangely surprised and young. "You don't give me much choice. You're always saying or doing something strange. It demands attention. I assumed that's why you were doing it, to be honest. I can hardly stop you." Hanyu shook his head, feeling his cheek scrape over the god's boots. "You could have told me to stop, and I would have tried to obey. You could have locked me in the closet. You could have sent me away." "Don't be ridiculous." Lord Antony's voice was a little firmer now. "Though I know that's difficult for you. Maybe I didn't like the way you were at first, but your liveliness is a gift to me. As Theodora herself pointed out, there's only 50 of us on this ship, and we've all been together for a very long time. It's good to have someone new in my life." "But you have new offerings all the time," Hanyu offered. "I've met Eiji. He was one of the handsomest men I've ever seen, and he was probably a much better attendant than I am." Stupid, perfect, beautiful Eiji. Hanyu had never understood when the rest of his cadre grumbled about Asao showing them all up. He'd always been so far from the top that it hadn't mattered so much who had the position. Why get angry and jealous about someone else's virtues? Now he understood. "Eiji," Lord Antony repeated. "The one you replaced. Yes, he was a better attendant, but you're better company and a better... I like you better, much better, even if you just smeared your makeup all over my trousers." Hanyu laughed a little. "Sorry, Antony." There it was, easy and natural as anything. The god's name slipping from his mouth felt like relaxing, like his body sagging against Antony's legs, and knowing that his master would hold him up, like feeling truly at ease in his body and his place in the world for the first time in his life. He felt like he'd been waiting forever to hear those words. "You're not the better attendant, but I like you better." Perhaps everything about him was not wrong, did not make him a bad offering and a bad fit for his life. Perhaps he was finally seen and valued for exactly what he was, even the parts of him that conflicted with his role. Perhaps he didn't have to be the perfect attendant to be precious to his god. Perhaps his master, his Antony, liked him.